everybody. Welcome to the Solar and Storage Market Series. Today we have John Cromer, Head of Training at Sol-Ark. We'll talk about the Sol-Ark 18k and about some commercial products that they have. I'll start with talking a little bit about RENVU. RENVU is a solar distribution company located in California, Texas, and New Jersey. We have several products that we wanted to spotlight here. We have the full Sol-Ark portfolio, and we carry Renon, Groat, HomeGrid, Lithium, and some other battery manufacturers that can be paired with the Sol-Ark. In addition to that, we have the whole Enphase portfolio with 10C and 5P batteries. And we carry Ronergy as our main solar panels with the 405 all black in stock and 550s, 545s for commercial projects. And we also wanted to mention the Bleaker T-gaskets, and we'll talk about the carports in a second, but these T-gaskets are used for any other scenarios when you want to seal the gaps between the modules. They come in several different sizes. It's a good product to have in your portfolio when you try to seal those. Two credit or financing companies that we work with. Credit Key is the first one for smaller projects. You can have a line of credit with them and purchase through RENVU using that line of credit. Another one is more for commercial projects called Build. If you have a commercial project, they will give you a line of credit for that project that you can utilize for other business expenses as well. If you don't have an account with Build, contact us and we will help you set it up. This is our commercial price list. We're listing here existing inventory and things that are on the way with pricing. We're updating it regularly, so worth keeping a tab of those. We will share the link to this file. A few words about this carport. Bleaker makes a residential carport. This is a kit that comes on 1 or 2 pallets typically, and very easy to install. You don't need any augers or any heavy machinery. All you need is to dig 2 feet deep footings for concrete, and you connect it to it, and it's easy to assemble with a small crew. It's all made in the US with US sourced steel. See, we have here a short video that shows installation. Very simple. You can install on it up to 24 modules, and you can extend it to more than 2 carports by using shared columns and connect multiple units of these. Very easy to install and enables you to install a little bit more than what you can put on standard roof, and especially if you want to give the customer more added values to for the solar system. We're utilizing Iron Reach standard railing XR100 with camo clamps, so you don't see the clamps. It's under the modules. And then after you install that, you can put those the T-gaskets to seal the gaps, and it's a nice canopy for for backyards or cars. Okay, so now I will hand it over to Kyle to go over, let's see, to go over our solar kit guide. It's an online design tool, and you can get a quote for any system that you want. So I'll transfer it to Kyle.
Thanks, Ace. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now. All right, I'm going to start on our homepage, renvu.com. You can access the design tool either through the orange banner at the top or the hyperlinked image below. And let me zoom that in a little bit. There we are. Okay, so on the first page of the solar design and quote tool, you can choose between a full system or a subset of parts. If you already have solar panels, for instance, you can deselect those. Then onto the panels page, you can choose between, right now we have RunEnergy 405, 435, and 545s up. There is a dollar per watt cost metric under each one that gives you an idea of the relative cost of those panels. Keep in mind that these first two options are a black on black residential module, whereas this last option, anything above 500 watts, is typically a commercial module, and it's going to have a lot bigger footprint. So I'll leave it at 405s for now, and we'll go on to racking. You can choose between, there we are, images are a little slow to load. Okay, so we have pitch roof, flat roof, carport, and ground mounts, and then sub options between each of those. So for pitch roof, there's comp shingle, Spanish tile, flat tile, and metal roof. And then under metal roof, you can even choose your sheeting profile, and that'll change the roof attachment that you select. Under flat roof, we have ballast systems, as well as tilt legs and even tilt legs that would go up on metal roofs. Carport structure, as Ayers was mentioning, you can make multiple of those two cars in a joined structure by changing this number here. And then under ground mount, we have the Iron Ridge SGA concrete pier structure, or you can use Powerfield. They have their new tubs coming out soon. I think they work up to 45-inch wide modules now, which that was the main limiting factor on the old Powerfield tubs, was they wouldn't fit those standard modules. Now they will. They're in production and available for pre-order, so you can get them up on a project. We just won't be able to deliver them till close to the end of the year, it looks like. A couple weeks we'll be having a webinar with them, I think, and we can go over some more details there. But I'm going to go back to the comp shingle. We're going to just do a 2-row, let's do 2 rows of 10. And I'm going to leave both those in portrait. This minimizes the number of roof attachments and the amount of racking material you'll need for a 20 panel array. If you put them in landscape, sometimes you can fit some more panels, but it's going to take some more penetrations and some more racking material. So I try to stick with portrait where I can. And then you can even choose the roof attachment style. For comp shingle, Iron Ridge has Flashfoot 2 and Halo Ultra Grip. I like these Halo Ultra Grips, since if you have a weird rafter layout and it's hard to hit those studs, you can drive in a few more screws and just attach it to the decking itself. And it'll populate a bill of materials as you make your selections here. If you're not sure what something is, like that Halo Ultra Grip, it'll give you an image and you'll see a data sheet and an installation manual, which you can read about and learn as you go. So we'll stick with 2 rows of 10, comp shingle roof, and then we'll go on to the inverters. You can choose between microinverters and string inverters, and then optimizers that would go on those string inverters as well. We've got all of the end phase up on the microinverters, and then for string inverters, there's single phase as well as 3-phase 208 and 480 volt. And of course, Sol-Ark has options under all of those, and we do have the new Sol-Ark 18k already up on our design tool. And you can see some of the promotions that are offered with each of these. Right now we have a deal on the home grid stacks, so $100 off on those units. You have to email in to get that, so just let us know your quote number. You could also use RENN or Fortress Power or Lithium, the home grid there. Lots of options for batteries with Sol-Ark. That's why I like them. And then with that selected, you can then choose if you need rapid shutdown. And under rapid shutdown, you can also add those Tigo TS4A0 optimizers if you want module level monitoring and shade optimization as well. So once you've made those selections, you'll get onto the final selection page where you can add spare panels. Folks ask me what's like a rule of thumb for a bare minimum of spare panels, and I'd say at least one per pallet. That bottom panel on the pallet's the most likely to get busted in shipping. And if it doesn't, you also have a chance in the install or after the install, wayward frisbee or branch. So it's nice to have a spare years down the line. That drop-in replacement might not be so easy to find anymore. And then you can choose cables, connectors, and wire clips, PV labels, Lumen smart panels an option as well, and EV chargers. Once you've made your selections, you'll get onto this final page, which will give you your bill of materials. If you want to change just some of the quantities in here for whatever reason, just email in with your quote number, and myself or one of my colleagues can help you out with that. And then also these deals here that our website might not have the right configuration to put the discounts in automatically. So oftentimes we'll need to go in and add those manually to these big quotes. So to get that quote, just punch in your email address, and the zip code is the main two things that we need to generate the shipping costs to that location as well as tax. Once you punch that in, hit email me a quote. You'll get a PDF copy in your email with that quote number, and just send that on to us and we can help you out with any questions you might need. We also actively look over that list of quotes that comes through our system, and if we see any availability or configuration concerns, we'll reach out to you. And if there's any promotions or deals, we'll also proactively reach out to you as well. So highly recommend taking advantage of that. And then also with that quote number, you can go over to permits. You can fill out this basic permit form, take that PDF, send it off to Joshua over at Illumini, and they are really quick and low cost on generating those permit plan sets to send to your AHJ, get things signed off, and get you onto install. So that is all about our design tool. Thanks, guys. I'm going to hand it back to Aris.
If you have any questions about these products or about Sol-Ark while John is presenting, please feel free to ask on the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll get to the questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. You can also email our sales team at info@renvu.com for more information and pricing. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a link in a follow-up email. We also have recordings of previous webinars on the RENVU YouTube channel if you want to review any. And without further ado, I will hand it over to John.
All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to get into 18K in just a minute. Very exciting about where that's going to take Sol-Ark as a company. Speaking of which, Sol-Ark is an American company. We are a non-PFE company that will allow commercial projects to do the direct cost allocation for qualifying for the ITC next year. We are going to talk about some new commercial products in the second half of this presentation. So I'm not going to give too much time introducing Sol-Ark. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with it, and what intro slides we have will increase that familiarity slightly. But I could go on and on about how we are over a decade old and have more field experience in transformerless hybrid inverters than anyone else on the market. But the key takeaway here is that our original 8K inverter was launched in 2018. And the inverter that's becoming the design paradigm in industry, a all-in-one hybrid inverter with grid pass-through. Well, we've been doing that with our 15k inverter since 2022. So, it took Tesla to the Tesla Powerwall 3 in order to get to hybrid inverters. And we have a very long track record of hybrid inverters. To borrow a slogan from PNC Bank, the PNC Bank says they are brilliantly boring. And when you look at our inverter product line, it is clearly evident that when we launch a new inverter, it is just building on the same system architecture that we've had in the field tested since 2018. Now we do have some commercial battery options, and we have a new commercial battery option that we'll be talking about later on in the presentation that dramatically lowers the cost of outdoor battery options, and we'll save that to the second half. Now, all of our inverters, our specialty is in all-in-one hybrid inverters. And what that means is we don't combine the battery and the inverter together. We keep them separated, but we try to put as much, what in other products would be balance of system equipment. We try to package, what you need for grid interconnection for whole home backup into our inverter. And that means the inverter becomes a hub. You can connect solar to it. You can connect batteries to it. You can connect the grid straight to it. It has a port for the load. So whatever power the inverter can't provide, it'll pass through grid power to fully power a 200 amp service. When the power goes out, you're restricted to the nameplate rating of the inverter when there's a grid outage. So we'll talk about how the 18K improves that compared to the 15K. But before we do, the last but not least feature of the hybrid all-in-one port inverter is a bonus port, and we call it the gen port because traditionally it's been used for a generator hookup. It's a very convenient location for a generator hookup. But if you don't have a generator on your project, you can use that gen port to overcome a variety of design challenges. If you like using in-phase microinverters, you can do that with a Sol-Ark system. You can interconnect your in-phase subpanel onto the gen port for AC coupled solar. Or if your solar array is already in existence and your residential customers want to hit that tax credit one more time before it goes away next year at the residential level, you could take an existing batteryless solar array, AC couple it to a Sol-Ark on that gen port for a very easy installation. If you're not going to do AC coupling and you're not going to do a generator, some of our customers use the gen port for EV backup. And what I mean by that is Sol-Ark at this time, you have to be very advanced as a designer and installer to implement vehicle to load or vehicle to home with your EVs. Not that it's impossible, but it's really something that I don't recommend unless you're already experienced in our architecture and well-versed in system design. However, where we do see customers using EVs in Sol-Ark is if the jurisdiction says, adding an EV charger will overload your panel, and so you're going to have to upgrade to, say, a 400 amp service. With the Sol-Ark, you can say, no, we don't. We're adding more power to the site with the Sol-Ark, and we're going to land that EV charger onto the gen port. And what that'll do is it'll add more power to the system, give you a convenient location for EV charger hookup, and it'll back up the EV charger so that, if there is a power outage, you're still able to charge your car and get out of Dodge if you need to. So it does cover a lot of bases for EV charging and pain points. However, just know that if you're intending to use it for vehicle to load, there's more that you're going to have to do as far as your design to successfully implement that. Last but not least, on that gen port, if you're not doing an EV, if you're not doing a generator, if you're not doing AC coupled solar, my favorite use of the gen port is simply to connect an additional sub panel and back up 2 panels rather than 1. So you're going to connect your main service panel to the load port, but let's say your home has an outdoor panel and an indoor panel, and you want to back up both. You could land the outdoor panel on the gen port and the indoor panel on the load port and back up both for very easy wiring. So it's a little bit of additional cost and material within our all-in-one inverters compared to some of our competitors. But then when you take a step back and look at it at system level, what it means is you're not buying a lot of extra balance of system equipment and material. So let's get to the Sol-Ark 18K. That's why you're here. Essentially, it is a bigger version of our 15K. So there's what I think is the most interesting about that is that it is not a brand new inverter. So, you might say, well, I want to compare this to, say EG4, who has borrowed heavily from our system design and architecture. Well, their systems have not been on the market nearly as long as ours. You look at, say, the EcoFlow Ocean battery, it's a brand new inverter with zero, field experience. When you're buying an 18K, you're not buying into a brand new platform and brand new system architecture with a lot of bumps to work out. Fundamentally, this is just a enhancement of our 15K. Now, we're going to cover the spec sheets and details, but what this means is you're going to get a larger solar array, the same number of solar inputs, but more amperage. So it can accommodate, better accommodate, say, bifacial solar panels and parallel strings. The DC input voltage of 500 volts is the same. It's a little bit lower than a traditional string inverter voltage of 600 volts, but with 3 MPPTs, what you get is maybe a little bit shorter strings, but it's a string inverter, and shorter strings means better shade mitigation and management without having to do say optimization at the module level. So I would strongly recommend just speccing out, say, rapid shutdown only for your rapid shutdown devices and going with a simple rapid shutdown solution up on the rooftop and leaving it to your strings and multiple MPPT on the inverter for your shade mitigation. In short, what that means is if you have a section of the solar array that's near the tree line, clump that all together on one MPPT, and then the sections of the array that are unshaded put on their own independent MPPTs. And industry surveys show that is just as good as having module level shade optimization, except for the most extreme of circumstances. So we have 6 solar ports on the Sol-Ark inverter, and what I recommend is just sticking to 6 strings. Not that you couldn't parallel more strings up on the rooftop, but then you have to get into fusing and combiner boxes, and it complicates the project. I would just keep it simple, 6 strings, bring them on down to the inverter and land directly onto the inverter. So the Sol-Ark 18K is 18 kilowatts of continuous output power day and night. So that's with or without solar, we can do 18 kilowatts of AC power output. So for the long Sol-Ark fans, you've been on a journey with us, and you know that, way back in 2020 when we did the 12K, that was really a 9 kilowatt inverter with an additional 3 kilowatts of DC charge control, taking you up to 12 kilowatts. And yeah, we get kind of egg on our face for that naming convention. Much of our industry has copied that. Unfortunately, Sol-Ark, we've kind of retreated away from it. So with the 15K inverter, it was 15 kilowatts of AC output, but only with solar. The nameplate on the Sol-Ark 15K for the battery component was 12. If you are familiar with the 15K, you'll know that 12 kilowatts was a very conservative spec. because when you looked at our 275 amp charger times 51 volts, you're like, volt times amp is watt, and that's more like 14 kilowatts. We conservatively spec'd out the 15K to say, from the top of the battery range to the bottom of the battery range, you can rely upon 12 kilowatts of power. But if you're experienced with the 15K, you'll know for half an hour or even longer, as long as your batteries are at a healthy state of charge, it can do longer, not continuous duration, but longer durations with above 12K. With the 18K, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's an 18 kilowatt nameplate inverter with or without solar, and that is an AC output rating. So, we are beyond that kind of differentiating out between the PV processing capability, the AC output. This is an 18 kilowatt inverter, and we'll get in some nuance of that as we go. It is stackable, so you can do very large systems. If you're doing agricultural commercial application, you might be getting into some 2,000 amp agriculture on split phase, pretty intense stuff. You can do that with the Sol-Ark. I think for 400 amp service, there's no better platform than a Sol-Ark. You just use 2 inverters, not 1. But more on that and the implications on that in a minute. Now, Sol-Ark traditionally has this reputation for being an expensive inverter. And, we might litigate that that's not really expense because you're getting all this additional stuff that you're going to have to buy anyway. But, at the end of the day, Sol-Ark has that reputation of being more premiumly priced than some of our competition. I would say now is the right time to revisit those assumptions. The way that Sol-Ark is responding to the tax credit for residential going away next year is to make the inverter larger and to increase the size of the inverter more than the cost so that it becomes more cost effective at scale. But the big value differentiator that's new to this year is not just the 18K that's brand new, but what's been on the market for a little bit now is a significant upgrade in the cost effectiveness of our battery partners. And what I mean by that is historically, Sol-Ark has had battery partners with like 5 kilowatt hours stackable batteries that you can pick up and move around and that are really easy to install. But when you look at our competition tends to sell, 300, 400 pound batteries that it takes a work crew to kind of wrestle into place. And the simple fact is those large, heavy batteries that you have to wrestle into place, they're cheaper per kilowatt hour than the more modularized batteries. So we now have batteries that are called monolithic batteries. Think about like the movie Space Odyssey 2001 with the big black monolith. This is what these monolithic batteries are. They're big, rectangular, heavy objects that installers like because cost is king and they're budget friendly. And so these monolithic batteries, they're Discover makes one, Renon makes one. They'll output 9 kilowatts of power each, and being a 18 kilowatt inverter, you pair 2 of them together, 9 kilowatts each means you'll get their full 18 kilowatts of power out of the batteries. So that's what I recommend. These batteries have we'll get more into the implications of the wiring here, but again, now is the right time to revisit your cost assumptions of Sol-Ark, because with the 18K inverter paired with these monolithic batteries, we deliver the best cost per kilowatt and the best cost per kilowatt hour in the industry, at least by any kind of system architecture that has any demonstrable field experience and market experience in the United States. I'd also say this is with 48 volt architecture, and as far as installers who like to set it and forget it, you're going to have less problems with 48 volt batteries than you would with higher voltage batteries, especially if there's an expectation that you might have to service the battery down the road, or that the customer might actually have some prying hands and start to monkey around with their system. 48-volt architecture is simply a safer architecture than high voltage and more proven. So again, if you're skeptical on the Sol-Ark claims for dollar per kilowatt hour leadership or dollar per kilowatt price leadership, just understand that those pricing assumptions go back to smaller, more modular, easier to install stackable batteries, which you can still buy. And if you're doing projects in remote locations, you have to hike in and you don't want to rent specialty equipment, maybe there is a reason to go with the more expensive option that's a little easier to install. But most installers, you compete on, dollars per watt and dollars per kilowatt hour. And it's these monolithic batteries that bring Sol-Ark more in line with the mainstream. We have that because we enable a battery agnostic architecture. That means you can get really familiar with our inverters, but our battery partners come in and out. They compete with each other on price. They compete with each other on features. Certainly, there's more evolution going on in the industry with batteries than there are with inverters. And so this allows us to have a very stable inverter platform architecture while still staying up to date and competitive with the batteries. We'll get into more about what that means as we go. But if you want access to this pricing report, to read up more on it and kind of see for yourself about it, you can go to our website, and under our resources tab, under our marketing resources, you can find our residential energy storage value comparison document and use that to become more familiar with how Sol-Ark can help you be competitive next year when the tax credit goes away. That said, since we're on the topic, the other item to say, if you have any kind of design related questions, what we would like you to do is go to our website, fill out the contact us form, and then fill out the contact sales form. So even if it's a design question, you might think, well, do I contact support or do I contact sales? Leave technical support for the field installer and for the customer post commissioning. So actually, if you're in the installation or post installation, that's what the support team is for. We have technical sales and field application engineers embedded within the sales team to answer design and development questions. So if you have design and development or project preparation questions, go to the contact sales form. You'll get better informed responses because that team is more design oriented, whereas the support team is more focused on getting the projects successfully commissioned and beyond. And we will talk about the Sol-Ark PCS listings. I see, Paul, you're saying one issue we're running into is not being able to backfeed Sol-Ark even on a 225 amp bus. I think you are misinformed on that issue, Paul, because if you go to the California Energy Commission list and look at their UL 1741 PCS listings, all of our inverters of merit, which I'm talking about, like the 12K, the 15K, are PCS listed. So if the 18K is not on that list, I think it is, but if it's not on that list, it will be. I'm not certain that on the 18K that the load slide connection is as much of an issue, but it is definitely a design strategy that's critical for commercial, and we'll talk about that as we go. You also say sounds like a lot of large cables. It's actually not a lot of large cables, and I'll explain why in a minute. Yeah, so historically, the wiring of the batteries has been a sticking point within industry, and we'll talk about that, how we overcome that in a few slides. A very easy, simple install. So thinking about what 2026 looks like, with one Sol-Ark 18K and two 16 kilowatt hour batteries, which is about a 32 kilowatt hour battery, Um, the the question is like, well, what is the right amount of batteries to deliver to a customer for whole home backup? So this is an issue I've studied for many years. I've built my own design spreadsheets to look into this, and effectively looking at electric bills and solar production and grid or generator charging and cycling the battery for minimizing consumption and counting the number of days out of the year that the systems use the grid versus using a battery. I discovered something that I feel is pretty profound when it comes to designing hybrid inverter whole home backup systems, which is for most homes, your typical, let's just call it 14 megawatt hours of annual consumption and for home consumption. Uh, you can divide that into months of the year. You can divide that into days of the year. You can divide that into hours of the day. And at the end of the day, the whole home backup question is this enough so that I can install it and then not worry about customer experience when there's a power outage? And the truth of the matter is 20 kilowatt hours of batteries, even 25 kilowatt hours of batteries, is not quite enough to go from sundown to sunup during a long duration power outage, and not run out of juice in your battery. And so that's, historically, lithium batteries have been so expensive that customers have been specking out less than 20 kilowatt hours of batteries on a site. And, if the customer goes into a power outage and they have a solar system and they have a battery system and it's sunny outside, they expect their system to work. They might not be able to read their electric bill, but they say it's sunny, I have a solar array, I have batteries. Why am I losing power in the middle of the night? Why did I pay for this system? The answer is, well, you still don't have enough battery capacity to get through that long duration power outage. But what I think is equally interesting is that there's absolutely a cliff by which adding too many batteries really just gets you into diminishing returns. Because the truth of the matter is, you either have a long duration power outage that has sunny weather, or you have a long duration power outage where it's like completely overcast. That could be a hurricane, that could be a tornado, that could be a winter storm, that could be a forest fire. It's for one reason or another, the sun is completely blocked. And so that's when you might add a generator to improve resiliency. But no matter really unless you're planning on buying multiple days of lithium battery storage, which almost nobody does, fundamentally the customer during those disaster events will have to manage their energy, recognize that there's a disaster going outside, and wait for the sun to come back up to be in smooth sailing. So it's really like you can solve long duration cloudy weather by adding a generator, and batteries improve the gas efficiency of a generator by like double at the end of the day. So very good combination to after you get to say 40 kilowatt hours, 45 kilowatt hours, to just say call it a day to add a generator, especially for a grid tied system. But really, it's for the generator-less systems, the economic systems, to say, is this enough to meet the customer imagination of whole home backup? And in my opinion, 20 or 25 kilowatt hours is not enough, because the system would still require a little bit of daily grid use. Whereas if you sell them 30 kilowatt hours or even 45 kilowatt hours, that gets them into being off grid for over half the year, which means that during sunny weather cycles, the home is effectively off grid. And that's what the customer expects when they spend this amount of money on a system, and not really understanding the relationship between system size and performance. And so what I think you'll see with the Sol-Ark ecosystem as we move into the 18K with at least 2 monolithic batteries, that this is the right system size to where you don't have to worry about the customer design. do I need two 15Ks or is one enough? One 15K is like just enough for whole home backup. 18 kilowatts, what I think about is like, what's the size of the generator industry when they say this is a home backup generator? They're talking about generators that are in, the 22 to 26 kilowatt range. Maybe those generators at most are running at 75% efficiency, and that's right in the range of the 18K. So the 18K, for reasons we'll dive in the spec sheet, but it's a large enough inverter where you don't really need to worry about the design. And then pairing it with two monolithic batteries, very easy to wire. We have two battery ports on the inverter, so you just hook up one battery to one port, the other battery to the other port, and you're good to go. So this is like an option that you can pretty much roll out to every single residential site, and then you can just fit whatever amount of solar fits on the rooftop. You have plenty of solar capacity for DC coupling the solar array or AC coupling the solar array to the Sol-Ark. Another thing that I would say is with these systems, it's very, very easy to add a third battery. And so you could bid systems saying, one Sol-Ark 18K plus two monolithic batteries that are in the 16 kilowatt hour range. That can be your standard offer. And then as far as add-ons go, you really don't need to add a second inverter on a 200 amp service. So you can have your standard system, and then adding one more monolithic battery as an add-on is very easy, very simple to do. So if you have a deep-pocketed customer who's wanting to not lose power even during long-duration power outages, they have the deep pockets, selling them one Sol-Ark with three monolithic batteries, pretty good value. I would say for a standard offer, one 18K with two monolithic batteries is good enough. And then for off-grid systems too, it's like, well, just keep adding more batteries, because with two battery ports, and given that these monolithic batteries typically come with either integrated busing systems or an adequate number of ports for wiring. Like, what I mean by that is the Discover Helios battery does not include an integrated bus bar, but they have 4 battery ports. And what that means is you can wire 3 of them together in parallel just by using the wires that come with it, and then click it into a single battery port on the Sol-Ark. So it's very, very easy to design with. You could get away with one monolithic battery in a Sol-Ark, but you won't get the full 18 kilowatts of power out of it. But it's very, very easy to design and install without any additional busing system: a 1 battery system, a 2 battery system, a 3 battery system, a 4 battery system, or a 6 battery system. And even living off grid with an 18K, for off-grid customers, they're more energy efficient. This is off-grid simplicity design. And for the customers who want to imagine that they're off-grid, 1 battery, 3 batteries, 1 inverter, and for your economic option, 1 inverter and 2 batteries. That covers all the bases for 200 amp residential. And if you have 400 amp, 400 amp is you just add a second inverter. And if you're really clever, you can get a 400 amp disconnect with a double lug, run to your 2 inverters, put in a power distribution block, and then run off to your 200 amp sub panels, and it's that easy. You don't have to buy all this specialty combining equipment. So, wiring with Sol-Ark, even wiring the batteries, even with wiring 48-volt batteries with large battery cable, effectively this design has evolved to the point of not needing battery bus bars and being able to just land the batteries directly onto the inverter. So a lot easier than those who've been doing Sol-Ark systems for the last few years. Looking at Sol-Ark versus the competition, we're not going to spend much time on this because we've touched on it a lot already, but keep in mind, Enphase combines the battery and the inverter together. Tesla combines the battery and the inverter together. Franklin combines the battery and the inverter together. And so with the Sol-Ark 18K, you just buy one inverter and scale up the batteries to fit the application. With all these competitive products, you have to buy more inverter capacity along with the batteries. And what that does is, as your systems scale into the luxury residential, the dollars per kilowatt, the dollars per kilowatt hour of the Sol-Ark really stretch out even further for these large luxury residential systems. So you're not wrong if you say, I do Sol-Ark for all the luxury whole home backup systems and then leave the smaller systems for less competition. But what I would say is take a look at the not just the Sol-Ark 18K pricing, but take a look at the Discover Helios battery pricing. Take a look at the Renon Excellent battery pricing, and see for yourself in terms of the dollars per kilowatt hour, dollars per kilowatt. So our system architecture, typically for residential, the Sol-Ark goes between the meter and the main service panel, and this is the standard residential configuration. Solar wires up, the load side wires up, the batteries wire up. You have that bonus port for a variety of devices, but you have to pick one, and then the grid side comes in and lands on the Sol-Ark. You do need to add like an external disconnect. We have training resources for you. So if you are a Sol-Ark installer, a Sol-Ark designer, even a Sol-Ark distributor, go to our website, use that contact us form, fill it out to the sales team and say, how do I get access to Sol-Ark University or your training resources? And we'll get you access to this so you don't have to, speed run through your Sol-Ark training. But again, with Enphase, with Tesla, with Franklin, even with EG4, you have to buy a specialty combiner panel to combine everything together, because you simply can't get to, say, 18 kilowatts of inverter capacity off a single unit inverter. So, with all of these other systems, you have to buy not just the inverter and the batteries, but you have to buy specialty combining parts. Whereas with the Sol-Ark, you don't have to buy, the combining. If you do combine either with two inverters, often you can do it with just the appropriately rated double lugs, such as you can spec out by code on a 400 amp disconnect. Or if you are doing like 3 inverters or more for much larger systems, your combining equipment becomes just regular sub panels and service panels to make that combining be done with just generic electrical parts that you can find at your electrical distributor, rather than specialty parts that by nature cost more than your generic parts. So the 18K can accommodate larger solar arrays, but it is fundamentally a larger inverter than the 15K. The nameplate on that battery for the 15K is 12 kilowatts. The nameplate on the 18K is 18 kilowatts. And so while there is a little bit of, the continuous output power under the right circumstances is only a little bit more, when it comes to the surge capacity, which is like that less than 1 second load that's needed to start up, air conditioner units, multiple air conditioner units, etc., that surge capability on the 18K is 50% higher than on the 15K. So this is a system where if the customer has multiple central air conditioner units, as solar customers are wont to do in Texas in particular, this is a system you can design and with confidence for a single inverter being adequate for that 200 amp service. While it's been a painful process for Sol-Ark and our installers and customers, we have moved all of our monitoring in-house. So that's the My Sol-Ark platform. That's the My Sol-Ark coding. That's the Wi-Fi dongle firmware. These are features that don't really move the needle in terms of sales, but they're increasingly important at the commercial level, and we're doing that as well at the residential level. So, you can know that you can confidently state that we are, an American company recognized as such. Yes, we do produce our inverters overseas, but we are making inroads at domestic content, increasing our domestic content. Part of that is migrating my Sol-Ark. Another part of that is actual components, and we'll get to that in a minute. Fundamentally, a larger inverter. So looking at the data sheet, the max solar array size is larger at 32 kilowatts, a little over. We can process 28 kilowatts of PV power. So, very large solar arrays, you don't need to worry about. If you really want to blow it out of the water, you can do DC and AC coupling simultaneously. Honestly, for off-grid systems, my opinion is that we've been oversizing the solar arrays for no reason. That in those circumstances, it's better just to accept a little bit of generator use rather than trying to subscribe to the idea that you could possibly eliminate the generator entirely. But it's there if you want that large array capacity. Let's say you still have net metering and you just really want to, do the largest solar array you can. We're not going to try and stop you. In fact, we'll help you do that. So the voltage range on the MPPTs are the same. The amperage has increased from 26 amps to 36 amps. So these higher amperage modules, you're not going to get clipping like you might have gotten with, say, bifacial panels on the 15K. It's the same number of MPPTs. It's 3 MPPTs per inverter. There are 2 solar ports per MPPT. So you can have 2 symmetrical solar circuits on each MPPT. All of our MPPTs are full sized. So we don't do this, one MPPT is larger than the others kind of stuff that'll trip up your install crew in the field. All the MPPTs are the same size. 2 solar ports. If you really want to, you could get 3 strings into each MPPT, but there are special, you'll have to fuse each string, and it's going to be a difficult install. I would just try to stick to 6 strings per inverter for the easiest, best experience. Getting into other datasheet items, stackable to 12 units. The DC charger has gone from 275 amps to 350 amps on the battery side. And that's where, if you see another inverter that's claiming it's larger than the Sol-Ark, go into the data sheet and look at the amperage ratings, because I've seen at RE Plus, I saw a 24 kilowatt inverter and its DC charger was 290 amps. It's like, well, I don't know about that inverter, but I know that our inverter, can do the 18 kilowatts with battery power. Look at that charging amperage. Getting into the more boring elements of the spec sheet, it's about the same size as the 15K. It's 2 pounds heavier than the 15K. So all intents and purposes, about the same size as the 15K. We did increase the size of the knockouts because you will need to use 4-aught cable to the battery runs. And so our knockouts are larger. One item on the spec sheet that I like to draw attention to is noise. And the thing about noise is not so much that our inverter is quieter under full load. It's really that what causes noise in an inverter, and it's the fan. And for a transformerless inverter at least. And so the fan spinning, what causes the fan to spin? It's heat. Okay, so what causes the inverter to heat up? It's running the inverter at full load. And so I think about these luxury expenses in residential where the customer wants to make their quality of life better, not worse. So they buy the system, the inverter, we have outdoor rated inverters, but no big deal. It's better probably to put the inverter in the garage rather than outdoors. It depends on the contractor, but imagine you're the homeowner and you've bought this, system that costs tens of thousands of dollars, and now you're getting home every day, pulling into the garage, and now you hear the inverter whirring away. Uh, the fact is most homes are not drawing 9 kilowatts of power, and so the just day-to-day operation of the Sol-Ark 18K, it's not going to run its fans nearly as much as a smaller inverter. And so just that, those little things, in terms of the design simplicity and the less noise, selling a cheaper battery but the right amount of storage to get through long duration power outages, all add up to a more streamlined operation for installers and a better user experience for the customer. So I'm very excited about the Sol-Ark 18K. It brings a element of design simplicity to Sol-Ark, far more than even what the 15K did when it came out a few years back. So let's see. Here we have the UL 1741 CRD PCS. So if you need to do a load side interconnection, you are capable there. Let's see. Yeah, so line side connections are substantially more expensive. So yeah, you have that UL 1741 CRD PCS. And then another question was talking about the power supply on the 12-volt communication board. It is bigger than the 15K. Honestly, I would not take power for rapid shutdown off of the inverter if at all possible. I understand that, if the inverter's outdoors and you don't have AC power out to the inverter, and you don't want to run AC power out to the inverter, you say, can I just pull it off the COM board? There was the 100 milliamp power for the 15K was not conservatively spec'd, and by the time you get into MLPE with monitoring or optimization, the amperage would often fluctuate from those systems above 100 milliamps. And so, as the asker of that question knows, it's with a 15K, you really have to use the external AC power supply for your rapid shutdown system. For the 18K, the 12-volt power board, I don't think we've published the spec for that yet, but it's closer to 1 amp. I don't know if that's 800 milliamps or 1000 amps exactly, but it is there to power rapid shutdown equipment if needed. Again, I would still, if you're planning on using that 12-volt power supply board, the only rapid shutdown system I would recommend for drawing power off of that board is a rapid shutdown only system. And not so much because of the power draw itself, but because it is a less complicated system than module level monitoring or module level optimization. And so you're going to have less issues with drawing power, from the inverter COM board, which is inserting a failure point into the system. So if you're using rapid shutdown with module level monitoring, or rapid shutdown with module level monitoring and optimization, I would still stick to the AC power transmitter, just because it is a risk reduction for power electronics that require high power and that really are not intended to be powered off the inverter. Rapid shutdown only, that's what I'm partial to. And so I'd say, if you are not going to power the rapid shutdown system off of the rapid shutdown manufacturer's AC power supply, if you're just not going to do that, and you're going to run your power off of the COM board on the Sol-Ark, just know that you can do it with the 18K far more than you could do it with the 15K. But B, I would still only recommend you do it with rapid shutdown only electronics, and let the MPPTs of the inverter itself do your shade mitigation. The gen port, The this is something that I just recently learned. But the relay on the GIN port is larger than on the 15K as well. So I don't know if we've updated our manual to reflect that, but I believe that will resolve some customers who, if they buy, say, a 22 kilowatt stationary generator, if they actually want to run the generator at 22 kilowatts, the GIN port of the Sol-Ark clipped at 19 kilowatts and would shut off if you went above that. I'm not sure what our software constraint is on the GIN port, but I know the relay is larger, so there is a possibility that the GIN port is a little bit larger than on our initial product documentation. So, it's like, well, why is that? It's like, well, the test labs really aren't looking at things like what's the GIN port aspect when they're detailing things like their standard inverter templates. On that domestic content, the 18K has the MCU board made in the United States. So, the move to domestic manufacturing is not a sprint. It is a one step at a time. That is the only way to get there. But we have Sol-Ark with our monitoring system in the USA, and then we also have Sol-Ark with the MCU board on the 18K in the USA. This is the domestic content is really a more important topic for commercial rather than residential, because next year there are percentage tables, and if you don't meet the certain percentage for non-China material on your project, then you don't qualify for the tax credit. Now that's difficult because those actual percentage tables have only been published for the domestic content incentive and not for the FEOC qualification. But know that Sol-Ark, we are a non-PFE entity, and so that allows you to do a direct cost allocation. And we intend to publish the non-PFE content documents this year. But the easiest way to avoid all of that, because the fact of the matter is, next year, if you're claiming the commercial tax credit, you have to keep tremendous documented records on that for like a 10-year period. And you can avoid all of that rigmarole for your projects in 2026 if you put a 5% down payment on your commercial projects in 2025, provided that they're under like 1.5 megawatts. So, reach out to RENVU if you have commercial projects that will come out of the ground in 2026. You don't have to start the project literally for breaking ground, as long as the project's like I think it's below a megawatt for the battery side and below a megawatt and a half for the solar side. That accommodates almost all Sol-Ark projects. So, put your 5% down payment for your 2026 projects in December of 2025, and you will avoid a lot of the tax credit qualification concerns. And even if you qualify for the tax credit, the paperwork concerns if you start your project next year. So I'll just keep that in mind. Now, talking about our commercial product line, and so Sam, I'm going to go through and answer like 15K questions real quick. But Sam, to answer your question, I don't know the exact power output on the COM board, but you're saying AP Smart needs 800 milliamps and Tigo needs 800 amps, and I'm confident that the COM board is at least 800 milliamps. So, can you just run it for AP Smart optimizers and Tigo optimizers? Probably, but I don't think it's a great idea. I think that doing rapid shutdown only is the better way. And when I say that, I'm speaking more as someone who was an installer for 10 years before going into manufacturing in 2020 or 2018. Man, I got into the industry in 2008. It's getting hard to actually acknowledge that I'm getting old. Let's see, VPP incentives for battery systems via Uplight. As the VPP administrator, Sol-Ark is not compatible with Uplight, which makes it harder. Can Sol-Ark work to join this VPP program for the 12K, 15K, 18K? And I would say also for the commercial line, there are some Uplight programs that are there. We're working on it. You know, the VPP, it's very difficult for an inverter manufacturer because we get very little reward for participating in VPP, and we get a lot of the liability by the nature of you need the inverter API system to operate effectively. And a monitoring system for VPP events is very different than a monitoring system for just casually monitoring your system performance. So there's, what you will have to look out for that Uplight integration is when Sol-Ark announces, say it's API integration with Flip or something like that. That's when you'll be able to participate in the Uplight incentives. If you're wanting to participate in Uplight incentives for commercial, you might not need to rely on my Sol-Ark API. You may use a Modbus controller solution. What I would do in that circumstance is reach out to your Sol-Ark sales rep and also your battery sales rep, and just treat each VPP program as a case by case. We've seen VPP programs get canceled as well, as we see in California. Let's see. Idle power for the Sol-Ark always seems to be on the high end. Can you speak to why that is, or compared to other battery inverter systems? I don't know. Hybrid inverter is both the battery inverter and the solar inverter. So you have to add up all the charge controllers and all the inverter components to get there. Um, you know, I don't particularly think that it's that high for an inverter of that size, and I'm trying not to be dismissive, but I've seen battery management systems, for example, that in sum total draw far more idle current than the Sol-Ark. Um, I'm I am also not really efficiency is only important so far. The fact of the matter is a solar array when you're off grid on a sunny day will always drive the battery up to 100% and then strand a bunch of energy. So you get the most amount of inefficiency with stranded energy, and then overnight, uh, the constraint where idle energy, idle consumption has become the constraint, is that the batteries have been too expensive. So customers have bought these like 5 kWh compartmentalized batteries. When you get into the monolithic batteries, you have far less parasitic load per battery module. And so I think to reduce idle consumption, you're going to get better with Sol-Ark than others by going into those larger form factor batteries. The Royce, on the conduit gutters, I don't know about Renon. I think they have that, but I know with the Discover batteries, they sell that custom gutter that in it, when you look, you can't tell from looking straight at it, but they've factored in the airflow considerations. So by the battery manufacturer's gutter accessory, to be able to butt up the gutter directly into the Sol-Ark as shown, because there's a little bit more to that airflow than meets the eye. If it's all happening kind of behind the unit. Now, if you're not using a custom gutter, what I would do is I would offset from the wall with like some fixed channel unistrut, and then go with a shorter gutter so that you still leave some additional air gap between the inverter and the wall. What the fans coming out the bottom and top it's all sealed from the weather, so this isn't a water humidity issue. But the fans going out the bottom and the top allow you to put the inverters closer together. If the fans come out the side, then in a parallel inverter system, the air blows into each other. Briggs and Stratton, another great battery provider. It's just I'm trying to choose the ones that are monolithic. If you want to go for stackable batteries, Briggs and Stratton, Briggs and Stratton has been around for 100 years, and they also have a great generator product line. So, if you're not really looking for budget as the be all and end all, but you're looking for America, and you're looking for generators, and looking for an easy, good-looking battery, Briggs and Stratton is absolutely another viable option that's attractive to customers. Okay, getting into our new commercial batteries, and I know we have to go, so we're going to do this really, really quick. But I want you to look at the battery on the left and look at that big battery module compared to the battery in the middle, which is a smaller battery module. So historically, Sol-Ark has had its indoor battery cabinet with these 5 kilowatt hour modules. And look, this is great if you are doing an indoor battery room and you have to get the batteries into the building. So we still have these batteries, they're still suitable, but the smaller battery form factor is more expensive than the larger battery form factor. And our outdoor battery units, it's the same. You have this outdoor battery cabinet, you have these 5 kilowatt hour building blocks. And the fact of the matter is, the Sol-Ark #1 commercial market application is industrial. So, we what we see with the Sol-Ark platform is a very large site with a small amount of power, relatively speaking. And what that means is in commercial, you really don't see a lot of whole building backup commercial systems. Now, with Sol-Ark, we do, because that's what our installers are used to. But when you go look at industry peak shaving, for reasons we'll get into a minute, it's more cost effective to do a part of the building as the commercial microgrid rather than the entirety of the building. So, these systems do fit the bill, but they've also been on the market for a while, and the battery market is evolving quite quickly into these larger battery cells. And so now we have a collaboration with Discover batteries, but this is a battery that Sol-Ark is effectively carrying under its product line and selling. So when you buy the Discover AES 210 battery from RENVU, they're buying it from us rather than Discover. And the point is that this is a battery that we are going to be well familiar with inside Sol-Ark, so that it's not the traditional kind of dismissive. If you call to ask about the batteries, we'll say, oh, go talk to the other guys. We are providing the frontline support for the Discover battery system, and it's a very close collaborative relationship where you can get that additional support if needed for more advanced commercial issues from them. But there's 2 reasons why we are doing this kind of special pricing specifically with Discover. And the first reason is cost. Discover has those higher ampacity cells. They're 3 times the size as the Sol-Ark commercial battery. And so particularly for our outdoor rated battery, this causes the dollar per kilowatt hour of our outdoor battery product offerings to plummet. So this is great news for the commercial installers. Sol-Ark now has significantly more affordable outdoor batteries. I guess that's the same message we have for residential. And in fact, when you look at the battery itself, you look at this Discover Helios battery, they're effectively taking their C&I 300 amp hour cells and taking them out of the commercial unit and repackaging it as a residential unit. So that's really cool, because that means you get, C&I grade product, but in a residential form factor. Now the C&I cabinet itself has liquid cooling. You know, it's a more updated cabinet. That gets us to the second reason why we're doing this kind of partnership, in this special pricing for Discover, is that in addition to lower cost, it's also an updated battery model. So if you're in California and they're looking at the size of the deflagration units, for the most up to date, you know, UL NFPA 6869 compliance. You know, when Sol-Ark came out with the HVR unit, we came out with that in 2024 at the beginning of 2024. And that means we did all the listings for it in 2023 when there weren't those requirements. We have deflagration vents on the HVR unit. They're just not the size that is now in the updated NFPA 6869. So if you're in a jurisdiction that does dot all the I's and cross all the T's and enforces the most updated battery codes, regardless of when they come out, as soon as they come out, they're implemented. There's no grandfathering or time delay process for implementation. And those toughest jurisdictions, the AES 210 can get through inspection. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons to buy the AES 210. We needed to update our commercial battery line, and we needed access to higher ampacity cells to make the projects more affordable. So there's compliance reasons to buy it. There's cost reasons to buy it. You know, looking at industry applications and trying to be respectful of your time. You know, there's VPP and DERMS. And Sol-Ark is still working on its internal VPP and DERMS platform. So what I would say is if you want to participate in VPP and DERMS with Sol-Ark right here and now, you're going to have to rely upon your battery manufacturer and what they recommend. It's probably going to be a third-party controls solution. So this is something that each VPP program you'll have to handle on a case-by-case basis. And, you know, if you're confused on it, just go to our website, fill out a contact sales form, and ask the sales team for each program on a program-by-program basis. Energy arbitrage, time of use metering. Sol-Ark for commercial is great for that. You don't need anything else. You know, our built-in controller can accommodate that so long as you're prepared to program it when you get to site. Check out Sol-Ark University for more content on that. Peak shaving is less common. I love peak shaving. That's when you have a kilowatt demand charge. They're really for larger commercial sites. And what I would say is you can have a large site and a small project. And why I love peak shaving is that it's more cost effective than time of use metering. It's almost like having a VPP program, but you don't need a VPP program. If you have a high demand charge, then you can do a project. So demand charges of $15 a kilowatt on up is where we see peak shaving applications start to come out of the ground. And then, of course, Sol-Ark does backup power and, you know, deferred grid infrastructure where, you know, it's like it kind of acts like an off-grid site, but it might be in the middle of the city. It's just easier to power the application with some Sol-Ark rather than to expand the facility grid connection. Trying to explain commercial design in a short period of time is very hard. But one thing I have to say is that whether it's peak shaving or time of use metering or VPP, what I see is the same design result, which is a solar array that minimizes exporting solar power to the grid. And what that means is the solar array might not be larger than the facility load. You know, so when you're designing your solar array, you know, effectively you want to look at your building peak load, and then for commercial, just kind of design a solar array that'll go right up to that peak load, but not something that really goes larger than the peak load. Because when you just design up to the peak load, the battery is sized well for peak shaving. The battery and the solar array is also sized well for load shifting. When you go above the facility base load with your solar array, now all of that extra power has to be stored in a battery, and you can only go so far before the project turns into an off-grid project rather than a grid-tied project. The let me get back to my mouse here. The the truth of it is that when you get into demand charges, or you get into time of use metering rate structures, variable rate structures, the larger the project gets, the less economic the project gets. It's like a reverse economies of scale. It's the opposite of solar. With solar, large projects meant low dollars per watt. With batteries, the larger the project gets, the more it's like an off-grid project, which is not as cost effective as an economics focused project. And so there's no problem selling a system in commercial that is a part of the building rather than the entire of the building. Is what that means is, if you know the system is larger, if you know the system is smaller than the entire facility energy use, you know that system is going to be fully utilized, and so it'll have the best payback. If it's a larger system like residential net metering, where you cover the entire roof of solar and offset 100% of the bill, you might as well be taking that commercial system off grid, which is not that cost effective. So Sol-Ark has been doing commercial. Our commercial inverters came out in 2023. Or sorry, 2020, yeah, 2023. The commercial batteries came out in 2024. And since then, we've done hundreds of commercial microgrids. So that's in manufacturing facilities. Again, these are smaller sites on larger facilities. Three-phase multifamily housing, breweries, distilleries, wineries, car repair shops, storage facilities, even a hospital, which, I would try and stick to the other applications, but hospitals do need backup power, even though it is a riskier proposition. All of these applications, Sol-Ark is field experienced with. So we could name you, 5 or 6 projects in each of these categories that we've already done in commercial 3-phase. And that ranges from battery only projects that just do a little bit of peak shaving and provide some backup. You want to do a larger project, then you spec out a couple of inverters and add some solar arrays to it. So, solar basically lets you do a larger project, whereas a battery only project might be, the smallest form factor. What I would say is to not think about a commercial project like you do residential. With residential, you do whole home backup, and you can do whole building backup with a Sol-Ark commercial system. And it's actually not difficult to do, because we include the grid relays into each inverter, and they're scalable. So you can just take the size of the service and scale up the inverters, and actually combining all the inverters together, you can just spec out general panel boards and use that to wire everything together. So, it is certainly possible and very accessible to do large systems of Sol-Ark, multiple inverter systems, whole building backup with Sol-Ark. But I would not neglect essential backup and load side connections for commercial. In the history of the industry, we have fled from essential load panels for residential. We have only gone towards whole building backup in residential. But in commercial, when you think about the economics, and that peak energy is only a part of the facility, and that offsetting only peak energy is going to be what's the most cost effective, then you do essential backup on the load side. The effectively, what I would do for a Sol-Ark commercial system is what most of our installers do. You know, just 1 to 4 inverters, 1 to 4 battery cabinets, and you can come in to the load side of the panel and plug in a sub panel, and even use that GIN port to plug in another sub panel. So literally selling commercial with a Sol-Ark, you can do a site walk, you can talk to that facility manager, and then you can say, okay, facility manager, now that we're in the control room, which of these distribution feeders is the most important? And that's going to be your interconnection point. And if there's 2 distribution feeders that are important, that's all right. You unplug those distribution feeders, you plug them into the Sol-Ark, you run a new set of home runs from the Sol-Ark to the main service panel, and that's your project. So this is that load side essential backup with peak rate economics is the what you could sell pretty much any business, every business. You know, this is what the Tesla Powerwall 1 was to the California residential solar industry, is the Sol-Ark 30K for 208 volt or the Sol-Ark 60K for 480 volt, coming in and doing a very easy load side connection, but instead of residential, doing it for commercial. Great value prop. And you know, if you sell commercial, get all of your sales reps to start focusing on collecting all of their 2026 down payments, 5% down payments for next year, collecting them this year and getting them into RENVU so that you have that audit trail. We are on Energy Toolbase, so you can model us in Energy Toolbase. Makes financial spreadsheets good enough to make a CFO smile. And then you know, we're gonna close it out is yes, we have the Sol-Ark 30K for 208 volt. The Discover battery cabinet is only for our 60 kilowatt inverter. And so if you can use it on 480 volt, and you can do 2 inverters that'll get you more like a 2-hour battery. You can use it for 1 inverter that'll get you more like it's a 3.5-hour battery. You can also do 2 battery cabinets for 1 inverter. So if you're peaking into the 7-hour battery duration, you can get there too with our platform. If you're looking at the pricing of the AES 210 and you're saying, I like it, and I want to use it for 208 volt as well, what you'll have to do in that circumstance is put a transformer on both sides of the 60K to go from 480 to 208. And you'll also have to spec out the AccuPanel or the AccuEnergy external metering system for that to work when you're doing the 480 volt inverter on a 208 volt application. So maybe you do that for 208 volt. Maybe you don't and just stick to our existing 208 volt battery line because it's easy and simple and available. And so that what this looks like is you might get a 208 volt electric bill, and you look at the demand charge, and it's 150 kilowatt demand charge, and you say, okay, I'm going to sell you a 1 inverter with 1 battery cabinet and 2 transformers and an AccuPanel, and that's going to be my 208 volt, you know, standard bid for you know, peak shaving or time of use arbitrage. Very simple. You know, if it's a 480 volt system with a 500 kilowatt load, you know, basically it's, you know, are you using the loads, you know, is the building load the same on weekends as it is during the week? So that might be a different answer for a warehouse versus a elementary school. But you know, the what it comes down to is if I see a 500 kilowatt load and I know the building load is the same 7 days a week, then I can go up to a 500 kilowatt system. If I see a 500 kilowatt demand charge and I know the load is different on most commonly weekends versus weekdays, then you just size the system to be less than that demand charge, and then you'll know shooting from the hip that this is a form factor that will fit the project economics and have a high degree of success of going through. So I do think it's possible during the preliminary project design during preliminary discussions and in the very first conversation with a customer about commercial solar, I think it is possible to make a viable recommendation for the project that is not to excuse detailed design. And it might come out in the detailed design that you could do a larger project. You know, there are sites out there that are selling 7-hour batteries instead of 3.5-hour batteries. They're just not as frequent as the commercial projects where the commercial microgrid is a subset of the facility rather than the entirety of the facility. So that's pretty much all we have for today. I'm going to go through the Q&A and answer them. I think we've answered most questions, but the last but least is the grid pass-through fail-safe? Is there a way the inverter can fail that would stop the grid pass-through to the load? So it is not fail-safe. You know, this is true of any inverter that has the grid relay built into it. And then it would be true of any external grid relay as well. So, you know, you have to watch out when manufacturers are advertising a grid bypass to say, is it a true bypass or is it just forcing close the grid relay? Because if the grid relay breaks, then you can't force it closed in all circumstances. So, you know, what do you do in those circumstances? I mean, first, many failures of the Sol-Ark inverter will still enable grid pass-through. So what you do in that circumstance is you basically reboot the system in safe mode, which is basically a no battery system, and that will unlock the contactors and feed through the power. If you want to eliminate the contactor failure, you are mitigated by doing a multiple inverter system. Not fully mitigated, but mitigated by doing a multi-inverter system. The only way to fully mitigate a grid pass-through failure for whole building backup is to implement an external bypass. That does not necessarily have to be a full service size for an external bypass. It could just be a service bypass, more common for residential with a mechanical interlock breaker than what you find in commercial. But this is where I very much like the idea for commercial of, instead of doing whole building backup for commercial, doing distribution panel backup for commercial on a distribution panel by panel basis for two reasons. One, you're not selling whole building backup. You're selling economics and then value adding essential backup. So it's not the same risk as whole building backup. It's an economics forward project, but also, you know, so to accommodate that, you know, 7, 8 to 10 year payback, provides backup power. So economic only project typically needs a 3 or 4 year payback. So those are hard to do in the small to mid-sized commercial. So adding some amount of backup power to these commercial projects does sell the project. But then it's like, well, how do I eliminate the risk of whole building backup? And it's, well, don't do it. With commercial, you don't have to. Just do essential backup. And what that means is you're going to have less amperage flowing through the inverter. So if there is like some kind of externality, like an overloaded inverter during a grid failure, you're far less likely to damage the inverter by not overloading the inverter. You don't overload. You really, and what I'm trying to say is, don't use the grid pass-through capability on every commercial project. Only use it for the whole building backup projects where you can price accordingly. If you're just throwing out backup power as a value add without really pricing in the need for it, I would say don't not sell backup power. Don't do economic only no backup projects, but consider load side interconnections and essential backup rather than whole building backup for commercial. They're just as economic. In fact, they can be more economic because just like a load side connection for residential, it's a little bit faster of a process than doing the full service backup. When installing mechanical bypass, the Sol-Ark recommends switching the neutral as well as the line voltage in a 240 volt split phase system. I would only switch the power conductors and I would keep the neutral connection from the utility transformer passing through to the main service panel. So, you're really not switching in a bypass scenario from the grid to a generator. If you want to do that, you can use the gen port. So there is, if the grid relay fails and you want to add additional redundancy, having a generator there is another way to risk mitigate. But when I would say using a grid mechanical interlock, you are simply routing the power conductors around the inverter, and that's it. And so that's when you're doing your AC 200 amp breaker in a box, you might want to upgrade that to a fused knife switch disconnect, so that you have enough space to put some tap connectors and add a spec out a mechanical interlock kit. And I can say all this, and it sounds like, oh, that's a great idea, and it actually is, because it's relatively low cost. And nowadays, Eaton and Square D, they sell interlock kits. And Eaton even has stopped calling theirs a generator interlock, and they just call it a mechanical interlock. So you can get listed interlock kits that are built to go with the service panels um, for that. But I would also say that they just require some additional tap connectors in the external disconnect that you have to buy anyway. So if you want to do mechanical bypass, it's there. It's affordable. It uses generic parts rather than specialty parts. But most of our customers do not do the mechanical bypass. And the fact of the matter is, the larger the inverter, the less susceptible it is to external events that can knock out the inverter. And that's why I feel like one big inverter is always a better quality deal than multiple small inverters when it comes to energy transfer. Okay, I think we have wrapped up. So, um, I don't see any more questions. I've really enjoyed your questions. They've been very informed, and appreciate it. I'm gonna drop my email address into the chat here. Don't expect an immediate response from me, and don't use my email address for day-to-day conversation about Sol-Ark. That is what our sales team is for, and that's what our support team is for. But if you do need some help, feel free to reach out, and we'll get you going to where you need to go. Otherwise, I'm done. Anyone have anything else to say? Otherwise, have a great day.
Thanks,
Yeah,
John.
yeah. If we can get
Thank
that slide deck from you, John, we'll send it out with the webinar recording.
Okay, sounds good, Kyle. I'll give that to you right after.
Okay. Thanks, guys, for co-hosting this webinar with us, and thanks everybody for participating and staying for almost 2 hours. That was fascinating, and obviously people stayed for the whole time. Our team will work on the recording and send a follow-up email with a recording and more information about everything we discussed today. In the following day or two, we will also invite you to communicate with our team if you want pricing for the bundles that John mentioned here, with the Sol-Ark, with the Discover, and with the Renon monoliths. And from here, have a great rest of your week, everybody, and see you soon. Thank you.